Hi, I'm Pastor David with Declaration Church, and I want you to think about joy. When I think of the word joy, when I say joy, what do you think about? What comes to mind when you hear the word joy? I think for most of us, especially in our westernized culture, when we hear the word joy, we think of those things that make us the happiest. Maybe you think of what it would be like to win the lottery, or hanging out with your best friend and doing the greatest, funnest activity you can imagine. Whether that's going on vacation to the beach or riding a roller coaster, or all these different ideas. I think those are the kinds of ideas that come to mind when we think of joy. And yet the Bible has a tendency to paint things in a very different light. And it ties things together that don't always seem to fit very well for us. And what I've discovered in life and in the Bible is that happiness, no matter how just overwhelmingly great it may be, no matter how happy I can get, it's still not actually joy. They're not the same thing. Joy and happiness are not the same. They are different concepts. They are different ideas. Joy is much more connected to the idea of contentment than it is happiness. And I know, I've got thrown out now 3 words that we use synonymously all the time. And yet I came across this verse that I think will help clear things up just a little bit. It's in Psalm 43. The psalmist is writing this and he says, "Then I will go to the altar of God." To the altar of God. Now, if you think about an altar, at least at this point in time, in this point in history, the altar is where you would go and you would sacrifice the best animals of your flock. You would sacrifice your best lamb, or you would sacrifice your best calf. You would sacrifice your best animals in order to show your gratitude for what God had done for you in your life. And so it cost you something, and yet that is, as he continues, he says, "Then I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy." So he ties joy with God and with sacrifice. It's an interesting conundrum for us. It's an odd dichotomy for us because we don't usually tie sacrifice to joy. We might tie sacrifice to a lack of happiness or sacrifice to loss. We might tie sacrifice to a more positive thing like taking care of other people, being giving, being loving, but we don't tie it most of the time to joy. And yet here, it is tied directly to joy and to God. It says, "I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God." And so there are 3 concepts here. There's going to the altar. There's having that exceeding joy, being God himself. And there's praising God with the lyre. And what I find so interesting about this is when you tie sacrifice to joy, it's so difficult sometimes for us to really marry those 2 concepts. And yet, throughout Scripture, we are given this picture of great joy being found in the midst of sacrifice and being found in God and God alone. The greatest joy, this exceeding joy the psalmist is talking about, is found when he is spending time with God, when he is laying aside all of those other things, when he is laying aside his work, laying aside his entertainment, laying aside all of the other things he could be doing to be productive or to bring himself or herself pleasure, to bring happiness, laying aside all of those things in order to spend time with God and to lay something on the altar, to sacrifice something to God in order to be It's just to receive that exceeding joy. God is their exceeding joy. Time with God is their exceeding joy. Giving to God is their exceeding joy. In the New Testament, we read that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And sometimes we've experienced that in our life as we give someone a gift or give someone something that they desperately need, and they receive something, just that huge blessing from us. To give brings us greater pleasure a lot of times than to receive. But what this really reminds me of is Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, where it talks about laying ourselves, our bodies, on the altar as living sacrifices, which in itself, a living sacrifice in itself, is a paradox. But that's what the psalmist is really talking about. He says, God, your truth, who you are, is my exceeding joy. And it is my pleasure to come and give myself to you. And so I want to challenge you today. Maybe this is something that's already a part of your regular practice. And if it is, then I just want you to extend things. But we have a tendency to avoid silence and to avoid the things that just make us uncomfortable. And silence is one of those things. Sitting in silence is difficult for us because there's constant noise around us. There's noise from traffic, there's noise from trees, there's noise from wind, there's noise from kids, there's noise from people around us, there's noise from the keyboards, and we put music on, and we have things playing in the background on the TV when we're home, and we have all this stuff going on all the time around us. We aren't good with silence. It's very uncomfortable for us. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 5 minutes today. 5 minutes, set a timer so you don't go too long, you don't go less than that. If you go a little over, that's not as big a deal, but at least 5 minutes in silence with God. Just acknowledge his presence and allow him to be your exceeding joy today. Allow him to be your exceeding joy. It will come when you're in his presence and he becomes your exceeding joy. It will bring you peace and comfort and confidence that you have never experienced in your life. And so I want you to take that challenge and apply it today. So if this video has been a challenge to you, if it's brought some things to mind that you want to explore further in Scripture, that's awesome. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Give it a like. Smash that like button. Smash the subscribe button as well, so that as we continue to post content, you're notified. So the subscribe button and that bell so that you get those notifications are really important. Thanks so much for being a part of what we're doing here. I hope I and Declaration Church are able to be a part of what God is doing in your life as we go forward. As always, I'm Pastor David, and I'm out.